Welcome to the Ball and Blockchain Podcast, Episode 1. I am joined by my co-host, Justin McKelvey. I'm Nils Smith, and this is the Ball and Blockchain Podcast. Justin, welcome to the podcast.
Hello. It's so awesome. So glad we're starting. I'm excited. I'm half awake, but I'm here.
You are here on the Ball and Blockchain Podcast, which we just named. We've been talking about for weeks, or a week maybe, and we came up with the name about 12 hours ago. Let's talk about the name, Justin, before we jump into the podcast.
It's kind of funny you say we talked about weeks, but I feel like in the whole podcast world, we've been cramming so much information over the past few weeks. It feels like months worth of information.
Yes.
Ball and blockchain. I don't know. Something about it was like the old ball and chain made me laugh, and then I went, well, I don't have a ball and chain, so to say. So maybe this is my new ball and chain, is I'm all hooked on crypto and NFT world right now. So
that's awesome.
The ball and blockchain makes sense for me.
That's it.
How about you?
And we're launching a company together called Crossover Collectibles, and it's sports collectibles, primarily NFTs. And that's a lot of what's gotten us into this. So while we're not going to probably talk about sports much on this podcast, it does somewhat align, and that got my attention. We're both sports fans, but this is a blockchain podcast. We talked about Web3, we talked about crypto, we talked about NFT, names, and we didn't like any of them. And this one caught both of our attentions, and hopefully you can remember when you're going to tell a friend about the Ball and Blockchain Podcast.
The old ball and blockchain.
So we're going to talk about blockchain a lot, and not in the nerdy aspect of it, of how it works technically, but really how you use the blockchain, because we're on a huge shift of essentially the new internet that's being built on the blockchain. Justin, maybe as we get into this, how would you describe the blockchain and what's happening in the shift to somebody in like your elevator speech when somebody's like, what is this? How do you describe it?
We're just going all in on
We're going all in. Episode 1.
Episode 1 going all in. That's the funny part for me is I'm glad you're talkative right now, because I'm still drinking coffee and trying to figure out what I'm doing today. But sometimes that's where my mind runs, so this might work out well. So last night I was actually having a conversation. I was trying to describe this, and it was like somebody who has no idea at all, and is like, wait, is blockchain crypto, or is crypto blockchain? What does that even mean? And so to be able to break that down a little bit was helpful for me. And so just to say crypto is a currency on blockchain was helpful to go like, oh, these are different things. But blockchain, I don't know, I kind of wrap it up as decentralizing everything, which is another crazy word that everybody's saying right now. But the best, a different podcast I listened to yesterday was so there's centralized banks. So picture a Chase or Wells Fargo there, or the Fed. There's a centralized version of a bank. This is decentralizing that and putting money into your own personal bank account that you own, not a centralized bank that owns your money, but you own your money. So it's a little bit of a twist. Obviously it won't look any different for you, but that's an easy analogy I've kind of come up with that's helping people.
Yeah, that's good.
What do you think?
It's good. I feel like I wrote a book on this 3 years ago, Crypto for Good, and I'm still struggling to explain decentralization. In some ways, I'm still struggling to understand it. And that's one of the things of why we started this podcast is while we're learning, we figured we would share our journey and bring on other people that we're learning from. But I think it's really, I think what it's doing is solving problems of the current internet. And so when you think about people have an issue with data privacy, well, this is going to help solve that. There's an issue with security. This is going to help solve that. There's an issue with trust. This is significantly going to help solve that. And so I think we're moving into a new internet, and then that also, some of the other language that will jump into this podcast is like MetaVerse. Like, what does that mean? What is that about? What is this space? And a lot of it are just catch terms, that came with Web 2 as well, of social and interactive and mobile and, all of those things. And so we'll dig into that. Justin, let's talk about who we are. for those people that don't know us, who is Justin McKelvey, and why is Justin McKelvey hosting a podcast about blockchain?
Oh, so funny. That's hilarious because I woke up kind of thinking that this morning of like, wait, what's my elevator pitch of me? Because it's changed over the years so much, especially even just this last year. But short version is I managed retail stores for 10 years, which has nothing to do with blockchain, but it gives me a lot of background into understanding people and sales and how people operate. And so I shifted into technology, and right now I'm a multi-brand technology officer for a couple of different brands. So overseeing that, but also just diving headfirst into the new company that we started together on all things blockchain and sports collectibles through NFTs, another catchphrase. So doing that for brands and looking to do that for myself and bring people along. So as you're asking that, I'm looking at like some of the notes I took, and I really would love for this to be just a resource for other people, where if I'm just throwing out everything I'm learning and links to other locations, if you want to read stuff or other podcasts that may be more informative than me, I would love to be a place to provide all that information. So I'm doing that personally, but also now through a podcast avenue.
I love that. And I think it's important to note you and I are not experts in this. Now
Absolutely.
we know a lot more than the average person because we're diving deep into this, but we are doing this in many ways to help ourselves continue to learn. So there's an aspect of this that's very selfish, but it's also we want to take other people along for the ride. And I think you and I are both getting a ton of questions of, can you explain this to me? And we try and we do. But you can only have so many of those conversations, and I think the interest level is now peaking. I think, and realistically, the interest level is peaking because people are making some crazy money on it. We just saw Beeple, last week here in New York, interviewed, because he sold a piece of digital art for $69 million. Last week I saw he sold another piece of art for $29 million. Yeah. It's crazy money being thrown around. People are buying crypto punks, for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Little, like, my daughter
like
could create those.
8-bit digital art things from like the original Nintendo or Atari days is what they look like, and they're selling for $500,000 right now.
Yes, it's
what
crazy.
Does that even mean?
Why?
Who are you, by the way?
So I'm Nils Smith. It's funny. I had lunch with a guy here yesterday in New York who asked me to lunch, and he said, "Okay, let me explain why I asked you to lunch. I keep hearing about you, and you seem to be able to predict the future because two of people that I work with basically said that you told them what they should do. They listened to you, and it's working. And so he's like, you seem to be this mystery man that has answers into the future." The reality is I got lucky twice in some ways, but I pay attention to the future, and I bet early on social media, about 10 years ago, or really probably like 13, 14 years ago, as I was in ministry, in pastoral church ministry. That's led to a lot of consulting. That's led to building a social media marketing agency. And in many ways, about 5 years ago, I started paying attention to blockchain technology. Unfortunately, I didn't have the cash freedom to go in like I would have liked to, but I've also, seen with even the cash I put into it, just incredible returns. But it's not really to me about the money that's been made or that's being made, but I think it's the opportunity that this technology is going to bring to the next decade that I see having social media did over the past decade. I think we're in a very unique shift technologically that's just exciting. Who would have predicted that mobile phones, like even the iPhone, like I could not have dreamed of the iPhone and then what the iPhone was going to do. And you think about what mobile technology has done for us in the past decade of like, I don't do anything without my phone. It's my map. It's my wallet. It's my, my communication tool. It's everything. It's my camera. And it's integrated into just all of my life. I think blockchain is going to have that kind of significant effect into trade and exchange and communication and, all the above. So that's basically, I'm a guy who loves to look into the future and find opportunities. I've done that through consulting. Right now, I'm leaning into this with our new company, with Crossover Collectibles. But I think that's one of many things that I'm excited about doing in this space in the future. And so I'm trying to lean in as hard as I can. And you and I are just having daily conversations about this. Yeah, so that's who I am. I'll just leave it a more of a mystery because I can't communicate. I can communicate who I am and what I do about as clearly as I can the blockchain. And so it will become clear. But I would say I'm an entrepreneur at the core that loves to solve problems and primarily do that through technology. If that's about as vague as I can be.
So specifically vague.
Yes.
You mentioned something in there about like these technology shifts. Is that the topic we should cover real quick? To like, hey, let's set some baselines for what we think is happening and some catch terms that are going on.
Yeah, let's do that.
Do you want me to give a big picture, or do you want to jump in?
You give big picture, or should we just? Yeah, go ahead.
So this is terms. Nils mentioned, I think earlier, Web3. Like, what the heck is that? So we're kind of seeing. I think that term is a little bit weird. So, because it's just not a commonplace, like, who says Web3? Nobody says it out loud, really. But we've kind of come into these, like, what is happening and what happened to 2 and 1? And so I had to ask those questions, which turned into Web 1 was the internet coming online and a personal computer in the 90s that is almost just like a text-based, like, you can go to a website and there's just a lot of words on a page. That was mostly it. Occasionally a picture, but mostly words. Then pictures came in. Then after that came video. Then you became interaction. And so Web 2 came around, and Web 2 is kind of defined as the social interaction time period where it became engagement and a lot more interaction on both parties. Now we're coming into Web 3, which is something different. So it's the beginning of kind of a new phase. You want to say what Web 3 is?
So Web3 is the decentralized internet. That's how I would describe it. Where Web 2 was really defined in that social and mobile, internet. And I think high speed internet. I think now we're moving into decentralized internet. That even saying that, I don't fully understand it, but I think cryptocurrency was our first venture into this of basically how money could basically done in a decentralized way, managed in a decentralized way. But now we're having almost all aspects of the internet becoming decentralized in different ways when it comes to search and social and media. And there's just a lot of possibilities here. And then I think, I just listened to an interview that you sent me, Justin, of Mark Zuckerberg talking about the MetaVerse. And one of the things he describes it as is it's interoperable. I think he is the word. He
says that word a lot. I remember going like, wow, he said interoperable like 17 times in a row. And I was like, I need to look into why he is saying this specifically.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I love is Facebook in many ways historically has created like you basically can only live in Facebook. And Google and Facebook don't play well together. Well, interoperable basically means that you have to play well together. It all crosses over. So it's all exciting to me. It's all confusing. And that's where every time I hear something new, I'm like, I want to dive in. Like right now, I want to get into, I'm working. I haven't ordered it yet, the Quest 2, but that interview got me fired up about, virtual reality experiences. And I played in VR for many years. I'm a part of a VR tech startup, but it was always just video. It wasn't really interactive, and I think where that's going is really exciting and interesting to me. And that how that ties into blockchain is confusing to me. But I think we'll understand. It'll make sense over time. And I think what we'll talk about is all these different, I think as we talk about how does this interact with sports, how does this interact with finance, how does this interact with art, and how these worlds all kind of begin to intertwine.
Yeah, as we're talking, I would love to be able to link like, hey, this is the podcast that we listen to with Zuckerberg because it's super interesting. It's like 20 minutes, super short. So if you want to find that, but I would also love to hear just like anyone listening, maybe one of you, maybe 50 of you, I have no idea, but like questions you have that we can address. Because as we're talking, I thought it would be great to possibly define a couple of these words, almost like every podcast that we do, just like, let's define 2 of these words. Like, what does cryptocurrency mean? And some of those are like understandable, but then some of them will get into like, what is Web3? What is MetaVerse? Because that could be 15 different things. Because Facebook, it for most people, it probably sounds like Facebook owns that now, which they don't. But they've kind of coined the term from a business perspective, so they could look like they own it, which is an interesting conversation. So just to be able to like answer some of those, but I'll link some of that if you kind of like view website and to check all that out. Show notes, as they say. Yes. But I think that would be super cool to do, just informative, but I'd love to hear the other side of that if you got questions about the follow-up. Where else are you learning stuff from right now? Speaking of other just resource topics. I dropped a few last night in a conversation that made me go like, oh, these are good analogies for people. These are great learning podcasts that are understandable, not just like, here's information that's way over your head. But one that I've liked that I've actually sent to you like months ago, but on the Armchair podcast with Dax Shepard, he interviews Ashton and Mila Kunis about Ashton Kutcher, about their ventures, and he's always into tech startup stuff. But recently, like, she has gotten really into it because of him, and so she started her own company and her own NFT project, and they really break down just some of the basics of that. And I love sharing that because they're people that people know and relate to because they've been in movies and they've been in TV shows and they feel like they understand them, as opposed to trying to listen to somebody talk super nerdy over your head. They are like, this is what blockchain means. And so the podcast is a little crass, so just throwing that out there if you're going to listen to it in the beginning. But then also they just get really into it, so I love sharing it because it's just an informative way to relate to people. But that's one that I'll share just because I think I love that as a foundational spot. But what else? Where else would you send people, or where should they learn from?
Yeah, Discord is probably my go-to learning place right now. I've had to learn. Discord just feels old to me, just even the way it like lays out. And I hated it when I first got into it, but it's honestly where I'm learning the most is getting into different Discord communities, the V friends. So I bought, one of Gary V's V friend NFTs.
Gary Vaynerchuk, you mean?
Gary Vaynerchuk. And so that got me into Discord a lot more. It's just the interaction happening in his, and then that led to following some other Discord channels, but his is the one that has gotten the most engaged.
What's Discord?
So Discord, that's a good question. Discord is essentially, I guess.
Go check out Discord, and I have no idea I know what that means, but it's just such a vague term. It's another term. I feel like there's so many terms that I'm like, I just want to stop and break them down when we have the opportunity. So when you're listening, it's like, I hope you get an education through this conversation. And the entire point of us wanting to do this podcast is, how do we like kind of magnify the conversations we're having in a silo right now between each other and our close group of friends, and help others get educated on what we think is going to shape the future right now. So what is Discord?
So Discord is basically like a chat forum, which kind of takes me back to like the 90s,
AOL.
Or 2000s with chat forums. And it's functions like a Slack channel is how I have treated it. And they call them Discord servers, which I still don't fully understand what that means. And but there's a lot of functionality there. And what I found in this blockchain world is Discord is a place for a lot of community. Telegram seems to be the place where people share news and announcements. And so those are kind of the unique social channels that people are using in the blockchain realm, where I'm used to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, some of those more common social apps. I've now kind of adjusted to Discord and Telegram. More Discord. I'm not doing a whole lot on Telegram. There's a few things I subscribe to there. So that's how I would describe Discord. Any additions you would add to that?
No, I was just thinking like, should we dig into this? No, probably not. But yeah, it's just separate chat channels right now, and a lot of different companies or more groups of people are facing like, hey, let's start our own chat group so we can kind of stay informed. And then you can you can get access to publicly to most of them, and then there's a lot of them that are private. But yeah, you can jump in and there's other people, like hubs of people learning stuff. So super easy to jump in and like be a part of a collective group conversation.
Yeah, and I'm assuming if we continue this conversation for more than 10 episodes, we will probably launch a Ball and Blockchain Discord server.
Essentially. Yeah, and at that point, it's like just a chat group where you have direct access to us to ask those questions instead of going through like website emails. It's, hey, let's just jump on this chat group and talk. And then you can get notifications based on anytime somebody specific you want to follow makes a comment, you can jump in and follow that comment. Somewhat Facebook newsfeed-ish, but more just a chat room, less of a page with media.
Yes. Well, let's, Justin, wrap up this episode now, and we'll save. We've got so many. I think this conversation has basically triggered my mind of 10 other conversations that we need to have. So our next episode, we're going to talk about the future, our predictions for the future based on what we know today, because I think that's the number one question I get is like, where's this going? And so we don't know. The answer is we don't know if we're totally honest, but we have some ideas, and so we want to just have some fun sharing that on the front end of this podcast. So we'll dig into that in the next episode. Go subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it is that you're listening. Tell a friend, leave a rating, leave a review. That would help us get the word out about this podcast, and we get excited about where this is all going. So we'll talk to you again on the next episode.
Love it.